Shuzo Oshimi is one of those mangaka where I find myself invested in not just a particular work of his, but the kind of idea that motivates his overall project, that including every single manga that he makes. And so I was motivated to read everything by him. And in today's video, I'd like to do a kind of tier list of all the manga I read by him, which is actually all of them minus two. His very first one-shot, which isn't translated into English, not even unofficially, and a kind of one-shot that appeared in an anthology, which I can also not find, and to my knowledge is not translated in English as well. But I will do my very best to talk about the series I have read, which is, again, pretty much all the other ones, which are happily listed here already, and I didn't have to construct this list on my own. So let's start right here with Sweet Poolside, which is 1 volume long, only 9 chapters. And I remember reading this and thinking, this is a really weird one, because for one, it actually has a live-action movie adaptation. I'm not sure if this was written for a movie, but I found that quite odd considering the content of it. Now, essentially, it's kind of based on this relationship between a guy and a girl. Again, we have a very, very typical Shuzo Oshimi dynamic here. We have a very timid guy and a little more overbearing girl about, the age when one hits puberty, so they're adolescences. And essentially, the relationship is this girl who, is growing hair at an early age, who can't actually shave herself without cutting herself, and so she's insecure about shaving, because if she shaves, she's going to get cuts, and that's embarrassing, but if she doesn't shave, she has all this hair, that's also embarrassing. And so she somehow ends up in a relationship, a friendship, we'll say, with this guy, who will essentially shave for her, and so that's in the entire manga, like, it's literally just him shaving her. That's just kind of weird, I'm not gonna lie to you. Maybe he's going for something a little more nuanced here, and it's just way over my head. But all I can think about while reading this is such a fucking weird manga, and why the hell did it get a live-action adaptation? That said, it wasn't the worst thing that I've read by Oshimi, and I don't think it's going to be the worst on this list either. And so I'm going to start it off on a C, but this could easily go down depending on how everything else goes. The next one we have is Yuutai Nova. Is this Yuutai Nova? Yeah, Yuutai Nova. This is another fucking weird one, but you're going to get used to me saying that very quickly because these are all fucking weird ones. That's kind of the trademark characteristic of an Oshimi work. It's fucking weird. Yuutai Nova kind of follows this protagonist who has this ability to kind of dissociate with his body, but like quite literally. Bro will like zap out of his body and then he can kind of fly around the city and do whatever he wants. And it's cool. Now, of course, being a Shuzo Oshimi work, this idea is put towards some sexual end in the sense of the character is a male who is zapped out of his body, we'll say, and then essentially goes to find his ex-girlfriend, who he's been obsessed with. They had a bit of a rough relationship in the past. He really wanted to have sex with her. She just wasn't ready. She couldn't do it. And so my guy broke up with her. So a bit of a dick move, but now he can't get over the fact that he lost someone that he thought was, so great. And so he uses this power to pretty much follow her around and stalk her at night. And so he watches her shower and stuff. Again, the kind of typical sexual nature that we find in Oshimi. But I think what is interesting about this is the kind of, again, the supernatural element, which lends itself to more interesting character interactions. We actually find out that there are other people with this ability, and so our protagonist ends up kind of encountering them, and it's through encountering these other people that it kind of works out the mechanic of being, zapped out of your body. We eventually find, the originator, we might say, of this ability, and what he wanted this ability to be put towards. Again, a very sexual end. But we also find a girl over the course of this that is very mystifying to our protagonist. He becomes like obsessed with her, like, who is she? And there's this really interesting scene where they actually kind of combine, and then so the implication then is that throughout the rest of the series, the protagonist is kind of linked with this girl who we know has a lot more knowledge on the power system than he does. Anyways, it works itself out in a pretty interesting way. I think my favorite moment from this is when the protagonist ends up watching his high school crush, his high school ex, we might say, and she is now clearly much different, and so she has other guys she talks to. She gets, she has sexual interactions with other guys, and this absolutely tears her protagonist apart. I think watching the kind of psychological torment as her protagonist looks down at his, his crush that he's still not over, getting fucked by some other dude. It's very interesting, but we can also see that he's not, just kind of looking at her for the sake of, I'm horny, I want to see this girl I like naked. He still does care about her, and this comes out in the fact that the guy that is fucking that girl actually ends up like taking pictures of them and trying to blackmail her into doing more stuff. And so, our guy who's looking down on this, zapped out of his body, is like, holy shit, I got to do something about this. And this is actually where he ends up encountering another one of the, the zapped beings, which is that girl I've already mentioned. And so he tries to devise a plot to really do what he can to save that girl. But again, Shuzo Oshimi always kind of subverting expectations here. She didn't need any saving, right? Because it turns out she ends up meeting up with that guy again. He tries to blackmail her, and she's like, why'd you have to blackmail us? We wanted to kind of toy around with you guys anyways. So I really like that. Again, it's always kind of swapping dynamics here with Oshimi. You can never really tell what to expect. And so it's little things like that I think make this a pretty good read, especially for its kind of 2-volume length, 19 chapters. And I think there's another volume or 2 more chapters that kind of conclude it. Overall, it's definitely much better than Sweet Poolside, but it's still not, on the tier of like the big titles. It's no Flowers of Evil, it's no Blood on the Tracks. The art is the earlier Oshimi, which is a little rougher, but there's still this kind of charm to it, which I appreciate. So next we have Drifting Net Cafe. This is actually, I think, the one other one that I haven't read. My bad, so I guess I haven't read 3. I forgot I hadn't read this one yet. I just assumed that I was because it was on my reading list for so long. So we're not going to rank that one, unfortunately. But then we have Avant-Garde Yumeko, which I think is actually such an amazing Oshimi work in terms of just trying to understand his kind of project. Because I think a lot of people, when we read Oshimi for the first time and we're not sure of what he's trying to put this sexual nature, we're not sure what ends it's directed towards. People can just think that it's him trying to get more readers by showcasing, sexual things. I don't think that's the case at all. And I think the best way to really understand Oshimi is to first understand what we mean by like sexuality in this context. And I think Avant-Garde Yumeko is exactly that. It follows this girl who is essentially just obsessed with dicks. And this obsession isn't motivated by any kind of like, it's not the case that she's like, me horny, me want dick. It's very much a kind of drive for what's other and this fear that she might not ever get it because it's so other to her. And so she kind of is just totally obsessed. And then the whole manga then is, again, this kind of more overbearing girl, or this much more, I don't know a better term for it, but like, I don't want to say aggressive because she's not like physically aggressive, but like her personality is a little blunter, I guess you could say. She's not so timid. She comes into encounter with a male who is timid. Again, this similar dynamic we find in a lot of Oshimi works: the timid male and the kind of more blunt female, we might say. This case, we follow the female, which I think is nice. And she, I don't want to say coerces, but there's this student, this timid male, who works with the art club, and he, just needs people into the club and so on. She's like, I'll join the club, but only if you'll let me paint you naked. Because again, she's scheming. What's different ways I can kind of encounter, the male phallus? Because she's so obsessed with this thing that's other to her. And the guy essentially agrees. And so she ends up creating, I guess what you might say, some avant-garde art. I don't know, some expressionish, I don't know. She essentially paints the guy's phallus in paint and like smacks it against some canvases. And she is just like in ecstasy she's doing this. But the whole time, it's never motivated by this kind of, instinctual sexual nature. It's not that kind of basic biological sexual drive. Because we find a little later, when the guy does try to put the moves on her, she's absolutely disgusted. And she's like, that thought never even crossed my mind. You're crossing so many boundaries right now. So that really indicates and sends the message home that this isn't about, that kind of basic biological drive. This is an obsession with the other, something that you fear you might not ever get. And I just think that's beautiful. I think that kind of, we're so used to seeing sexual stuff on screen or in manga simply to kind of draw viewers in and to appeal to our kind of, our instinctual drives. But again, Oshimi is really trying to draw upon like a broader notion of sexuality. This is something you find a lot in psychoanalysis, especially with Freud and Lacan. I know there's a large literature of psychoanalytic interpretations of literary works, and I think that such an interpretation would do wonders here. All that said, how do I actually end up feeling about Avant-Garde Yumeko? I think actually I'm going to be putting this above Yuutai Nova, because again, the art's a little more polished here. I really like the point that he's trying to get across here about the idea of sexuality, and that it doesn't have to be this kind of, immediate biological drive. There's a lot more to it. And I just think that this really exemplifies Oshimi's project overall. Every single manga you can kind of look back at Avant-Garde Yumeko, and this is kind of like the most basic representation of, I guess, Oshimi's philosophy, we might say. Then we got Happiness, which is something I really enjoyed. This was one of the first Oshimi works I got into after Flowers of Evil. It's 10 volumes long, 50 chapters, and it's such a quick read. The dialogue in this is especially light. I know that it's trademark of Oshimi to have light dialogue anyways, but Happiness is incredibly light. I love the art. It draws heavily upon like that kind of impressionist tradition. It's all about kind of depicting light and its different motions as opposed to a kind of realist approach. And I think that visually it's much more unique than a lot of other Oshimi works. It's really the only one in that style, so far as I can tell. And again, it's one of those stories that kind of introduce a kind of sci-fi element to just give more life to the possible interactions. Now, in this case, I think that this is the one manga where he really heightens the sci-fi element. Again, the notion of like the vampires, and he really fleshes those out. And it's not so subtle, like for instance in Yuutai Nova, where even though it is a pretty big thing that the characters can kind of come out of their bodies and interact, or certain characters can come out of their bodies and interact with the world. It's not like a global phenomena. It's not like this is impacting the real world events. And it's really used to just aid regular interactions. In Happiness, it really does feel like it's Oshimi's work on a kind of sci-fi, or Oshimi's take on a sci-fi kind of work, I guess you could say. It's very elegant, I will say. It's a very quick read. It's been a while since I've read it, though, so I don't exactly have much more to say other than that. It's also one of the titles where I guess the sexuality is really honed back, and it really hypes up, I guess, not hypes up, but it much more features violence and, again, the kind of supernatural stuff. So this is, again, one of the outliers for Oshimi's works for me. It's still terrific, and actually I would say that it's probably an A tier. This would be, I guess, if you're just into Oshimi, you want to start getting through his bigger works, you got to do Flowers of Evil first. You got to do Blood on the Tracks. You got to do Happiness. That's the other one I'd recommend. So Laugh Now, Die Later, if you're watching this, I know you're just going through I know you just read Blood on the Tracks. I know you're reading Flowers of Evil. Give Happiness a try, man. You got to hit the trifecta at least. You know what I mean? It's great. I think you might even like it more than Flowers of Evil, based on what I'm hearing in Discord. And, it's good, but you're expecting Blood on the Tracks. If you want something a little different from Oshimi, I think Happiness is exactly what you're looking for, my friend. So what do we have here? Is this Devil Ecstasy? Yeah, this is Devil Ecstasy. This was a fucking... Oh, dude. Devil's Ecstasy was... I want to say the weirdest one that I've read of all the Oshimi ones, because Sweet Poolside is weird in the sense that it's a fucking, like, it's two middle schoolers, like, just shaving each other. Well, I guess the guy shaving the girl. And that's kind of weird, but then like Devil Ecstasy just takes weirdness to the whole fucking other level. It's again set in a realistic world, but there is this kind of business, we might say, that's in there that has a sci-fi element. It's called Devil Ecstasy, which is essentially the informal term we might say is whorehouse, but we might also say sex worker business. And yeah, people go in, they pay a fee, and they can pick a lady to get with. They go into a room with that lady, and they do the do. Now there's this kind of mystery surrounding Devil Ecstasy because a lot of people after their visit to Devil Ecstasy are killed, and the deaths are very similar. You lose a lot of your muscle mass, your hair starts to lose color, you're always smiling and laughing. Like a notable characteristic of someone who's died from Devil Ecstasy is that they kind of die with a huge creepy smile on their face, like they were just in absolute awe, total ecstasy, you might say. And so our protagonist, again, a kind of timid male, whose characteristic trait here, or his defining characteristic, is that he's scared of big bosoms, which I think is a rather interesting angle. And interestingly, this is what saves him from Devil's Ecstasy. He goes in there, and everyone has big boobs, and he is petrified of big boobs because of an experience he had with a cousin? I hope not. I'm going to say childhood friend, but from childhood, who was essentially like, you want to touch my boobs, man? And he's like, boob. And that motivated him to never touch boob again and just be scared of boob. But generally just to be scared of women, it seems, until he meets one girl at Devil's Ecstasy who is a female with a flatter chest, which he looks at and says, wow, those are the most beautiful boobs I've ever seen. And she's like, oh, thank you. This is the first time anyone's complimented my boobs. I never have any customers here at Devil Ecstasy. But then she's suddenly like, you need to get out of here, bro. And he's like, why? And she's like, just get out of here. And then so he leaves. And it's because he didn't do anything, but his friend did. That's kind of how he starts drawing connections between what's going on with Devil Ecstasy. Anyways, this is more sci-fi, like I guess like Happiness, in the sense that this is very much in the real world, and it's kind of like a global phenomenon. People end up finding out about Devil Ecstasy, and then there's this whole thing, and the police get involved. And it's interesting. Again, it's a little earlier in Oshimi's catalog, so the artwork can be a little cruder by contrast to his more refined stuff we see nowadays. But it's still a fun read. It is 40 chapters long, 7 volumes. Or no, it's 4 volumes and 40 chapters. Sorry, I do have a little page up here with just all the Oshimi numbers on it, just to make sure I'm getting everything correct. And I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it. Thankfully, I started reading it just as the fan translations were finishing up, so I was able to finish it in a relatively short period of time, which I think is best for maintaining the momentum of a series. This one definitely features a lot more sexuality than other works, and I would actually say, as far as I can tell, it didn't have to be so excessive, and I'm not sure if it does serve as pointed I'm not sure if it's put towards a very clear end. I will say generally that the workers of Devil Ecstasy, I'm not going to describe them any farther because I think that's a major spoiler. The works of Devil Ecstasy, they themselves do have a lot of significance overall. But the fact that they have to be so sexualized, I'm not sure if that does serve a kind of a focal purpose here, but it couldn't. It just might be lost beyond me. Ultimately, I'm going to give it higher than Yuutai Nova, but lower than Avant-Garde Yumeko because, again, Avant-Garde Yumeko, I think, is just like the perfect expression of Oshimi's works, and I again, totally something that you should check out if you want to just really understand Oshimi, right? Then we got Welcome Back Alice. Welcome Back Alice, or Welcome Home Alice? Welcome Back Alice. This is one of his most recent works, if not his most recent work. It's only 14 chapters long, I do believe, and is currently ongoing. And I really like this one because, at least from my own experience, this is one of the few manga I've read to actually tackle with kind of transgender issues. And it could just be the case that I'm not looking for that enough, and so I wouldn't really have any sense of the literature in manga that cover that. I know Manga Crash did a video about LGBT manga, and I think that's really cool. And if you want to know more about that kind of stuff, go check out his video. But this is one of the few encounters I've had with such material, especially with the transgender stuff. I've read, some Yuri in my day, but this was the first to deal with the transgender stuff. And I really like it, actually. I think it does a great job. Again, we have this character, Alice, who was born biologically male, and then she eventually comes to the conclusion that, like, she doesn't, I guess, subscribe to the ideals that are attached to being a male. And so she doesn't, or they don't just say, I'm not a male anymore, I'm a female. They just say, I'm beyond gender now. Like, I don't accept any kind of gender roles, and so on and so forth. They kind of just dress the way that makes them feel comfortable. They act the way that they feel comfortable. And they kind of go outside of the classic male-female binary. But I think what this manga does especially well is just trying to give other characters in the story let me put it this way. Alice, they're absolutely fine with their kind of transition. They don't seem to be experiencing any kind of internal backlash. Like, there doesn't seem to be any kind of internal conflict within Alice. They are pretty comfortable with who they are, and they have no problem expressing that. However, everyone else in the story, all the childhood friends of Alice, have a lot of difficulty coming to grips with this kind of change, and not just going from one gender to another, but going from gendered to non-gendered, I guess you might say. And so watching Oshimi work out the kind of other characters' reactions to Alice's transition, as well as just having Alice interact with the other characters, it's very interesting, because again, we're switching up the classic Oshimi dynamic here. No longer is it just timid boy and blunt girl. It's now timid boy and Alice, which is genderless. And again, this is just a whole... Alice would play the role of the kind of blunt female, I think, if we're going to use like Oshimi's kind of typical character dynamics. But because Alice isn't just a girl, Alice is, a they, the interactions are so much more different than a lot of the other ones that we find in Oshimi's works. So I think this is a really fun work for exploring that kind of dimension of it. And again, it's another angle of kind of Oshimi's overall project. And I'm really enjoying it so far. But of course, it's only 14 chapters long, so it's hard to give any final judgments. But I will say, where it's much later in Oshimi's kind of career, the artwork is amongst his best. Like, consistently, it's very refined, and I love that. So as of right now, I'm going to give it the highest of B's, I think. It could become an A. It just depends on how the story progresses, where it ends, so on and so forth. Then we have Miss Kusakabe. Is it Miss Kusakabe? Yeah, Kusakabe. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm giving that one an F. Let me just go to AniList and read what it says. A disturbing look into a sad relationship between a broken man who's clinging on a cheating, elusive woman he's emotionally addicted to. So, conceptually, that sounds pretty badass, right? Oh man, trying to, explore this dynamic between a man who is fixated on love despite the fact that the content of that love is actually more damaging than not. I think that's an amazing kind of dynamic that, especially someone like Oshimi could explore for, chapters and chapters and chapters. But then we get, what actually happens in the manga. A man finds a mysterious young woman on his doorstep. Her passion and hunger for life suddenly shine bright for him in what has been a pretty mundane existence. And I think even that's kind of underselling the manga, because we can't understate how, I don't know, how Oshimi depicts Kusakabe in this one shot is pretty dire. She's at a pretty much an all-time low. By contrast to our protagonist, who isn't given a name, who is arguably the most average person in existence. I mean, he didn't even get a name, that's how average he is. I think that's actually a very intentional point on the part of Oshimi to not name the main character, because that's just trying to drive home how average he is. But anyways, to me, this is just overly edgy for the sake of being edgy. It does show a lot of provocative stuff. It talks about a lot of provocative things, and Miss Kusakabe kind of mentions them so nonchalant about sexual abuse and self-harm and such. And there's definitely good reason, I think, for people to discuss these ideas so nonchalantly, just in the sense of having not processed the trauma or any number of reasons like that. But I don't know, I feel like we don't get enough about Miss Kusakabe to really rationalize her position, and honestly, her kind of dynamic with the protagonist, well, the main male character, it's not very strong. You know what I mean? I don't feel like she actually ends up having much of an impact on him. I think, again, conceptually, there's a lot of ground we could have covered in this manga, but Oshimi just doesn't do it. And this is kind of reflected in the average score. On AniList, it's a 70 or a 45. Mean score 46, which is quite low for somebody like Oshimi, who's regarded so highly. But unfortunately, that's kind of the situation we're in. I would not recommend reading this. It's very difficult to find, anyways. So don't go out your way to try and track it down. But yeah, it's not good. It fails, just straight up. What do we have next? Waltz. I think Waltz was kind of like a preliminary version of Welcome Back, Alice, because again, this is another one that deals with trans issues. And I don't know. I think I read somewhere that it's supposed to have done the groundwork for Welcome Back, Alice. But anyways, I'm glad Welcome Back, Alice went a lot farther than this, because Waltz, I can almost remember nothing of. I particularly didn't love it. It did come out in 2017, so the art's still fine. That's around peak Oshimi period. That's when he's really releasing all of his big dogs. But I'm just gonna throw in D. There is a lot more to Sweet Poolside than there is to Waltz. I'll say that. Sweet Poolside is just it's so weird, but it grips you because of how weird it is. Waltz, I feel like, just didn't do a whole lot. I can't remember very much at all, bro, and that's got to say something about its quality. That's not... Oh, fuck me. That's not even Waltz. Oh, dude, idiot alert. So that's Waltz right here. This is Shino Can't Say Her Name. Shino Can't Say Her Name is a C, but let's see what AniList says, because I actually don't remember much about this either. High school can be a stressful time for many young people. The change means a new commute, new friends, new courses, new teachers. For Shino Oshima, it's awfully close to Mr. Oshimi's name. I'm only just realizing that. The change could have meant an opportunity to blossom into adulthood. Unfortunately, things go wrong on her first day. She fails to even say her name during the homeroom introduction. From then on, Shino is a part mute, part stuttering mess, ostracized and afraid of the struggles to find her place in this new world. But thankfully for her, she finds her voice through music and some unexpected new friends/frenemies. Okay, I remember a lot more about this now. To me, I see a lot of ideas that we find in Blood on the Tracks present in Shino Can't Say Her Name. Again, the whole notion of again, exploring the psychological part of why is she stuttering, why can't she say her name. Again, that's always reflected in things that went on in her past, and I think that Oshimi makes that connection rather strongly. I don't always think just drawing that connection is enough to make a meaningful manga, which is why I only did give it a C. But I do like that she does eventually find her voice. So unlike a lot of other Oshimi works, there is a kind of like positive conclusion, but it's, it's not without some difficulties along the way. She's kind of, she doesn't have the radar to gauge who's a friend, who's not a friend, and so I think that leads to her into some uncomfortable positions, of feeling betrayed and so on. It's a fun little story, but the more I think back to it, one volume, 11 chapters, I think I even liked Sweet Poolside a little more now that I think about it. Like, there's just something so fucking weird about Sweet Poolside, and I don't know what it is, but like, I feel like I gotta look a little harder at that. I gotta reread that or something, because I feel like there might be something more there, and I'm just not really missing it. Maybe I'll watch the live action movie. There's something about it calling to me stronger than fucking Shino Can't Say Her Name. Anyways, so Waltz is a D. Shino Can't Say Her Name is a C. Sorry about that confusion. They're very similar looking. Anyways, now we're kind of getting to like the last three. These are kind of like the magnum opuses of fucking Shuzo Oshimi. Thank you, Mr. Oshimi, for creating these. First, we have Flowers of Evil, which is an easy S. To me, its biggest feat, amongst other things, is just how uncomfortable he was able to make the reader in just a few volumes. I think to provoke such a strong emotional response is something I don't think I've seen anybody else do in such a short amount of time. So hats off to Oshimi for that. But I think generally that Flowers of Evil was, I don't know, fucking damn near perfect. It's been so long since I read it. I feel like I'm lacking to give it any real good analysis. But I was in Discord, Laugh Now Die Later's Discord, and this guy named Fleur. Whoa, I don't want to dox myself, so let's go over here. And I think he made a pretty good point actually about Flowers of Evil, if I can find it. I don't think I can find it that fast. Yeah, again, he gave a pretty interesting interpretation, so I'd like to shout that out right here. So Fleur, if you're watching this, shout out to you. But he was talking about Psyche and Nakamura are representations of the ideas. Okay, sorry, wrong. I'm reading the wrong one. But I think, sorry, I'm absolutely stumbling here because I have no fucking idea what to say. I read this like a year ago, and it's so like in the back of my memory now. But essentially that Psyche is viewed as not just a woman, but like this absolute ideal that is unattainable, but is so infinitely valuable, right? Because Kasuga, says Fleur, viewed Psyche as an untouchable angel and not a woman. And so again, Fleur here has mentioned that this kind of talks about how, I guess, males view females, and that this is kind of drawing upon some kind of literature. He does cite 2 books here that would have influenced Oshimi. It just sucks that I have nothing more to say about this because it's been so long, and frankly, I don't remember much. So thank you, Fleur, for giving me what little things I had to say about it. But I mean, this is fucking, like, in my opinion, this is peak Oshimi for right now. I will actually just rush ahead and put Blood on the Tracks second to it, because Blood on the Tracks is a little more fresh in my mind, and maybe that's why I'm looking at it more favorably. But I still think that this is one of the outliers of Oshimi's works. I think, again, if we're looking at outliers for Oshimi, it's going to be Blood on the Tracks and Happiness. Because Happiness doesn't have so much of the sexuality, and really focuses on the supernatural. Blood on the Tracks just introduces a whole new character dynamic, because in most of the other works, it's a dynamic between 2 adolescents of the same age, and kind of embodying that archetype I've been speaking of time and time again, or that dynamic between the timid male and the not-so-timid female, and we're just looking at it from different perspectives and with regards to different issues. Here, it's a timid male and a blunt mother, so the power dynamic is completely different, and honestly, that creates a much different story. This story is much more focused on just kind of the male protagonist's kind of processing of more or less psychological trauma at home, because his mother is such an enigma. Like, you can never get your finger on her. Trying to figure out her motives for what she does is half of the fun. And I think what the manga does well is it tries to process that reasoning through the eyes of the protagonist, whose name I've forgotten. And of course, he's a kid, and he's being influenced by all this trauma that he's experienced. And so that skews how he kind of rationalizes what his mother does. And just trying to understand, why is he reasoning about his mother this way? He does try to break free from the constraints that his mother placed down upon him, but ultimately, she kind of gets the best of him. But I would say where we are right now, around chapter 99, he's kind of, instead of trying to run away from it, he's trying to embrace his mother And I think in doing so is trying to kind of find his own freedom in that relationship. And I think that's the key to him kind of living his best life possible. Being free with regards to his mother is kind of the key for him being free. And I don't know. I think Oshimi is really nailing that point. And depending on how this manga concludes, it is going to beat out Flowers of Evil for me. It's plain and simple. I think that it's a much different experience than Flowers of Evil. Definitely recommend both if you ever get the chance. But I mean, yeah, that's my thoughts on Flowers of Evil. On Blood on the Tracks. It's an S tier. Don't get it fucked up. Definitely read it if you haven't already. It's one of the greats for sure. And then finally we have Inside Mari, which is the one good body swap manga out there, because I don't know, for me, Your Name is good, but like I'm just thinking to myself, and Your Name entertains this. They do the body swap, and the guy's like, first thing he does, grabs boobs, right? I know, like it's kind of it's childish, or it's immature, and it's why do we have to focus on the sexual all the time? I don't know. I think Oshimi here, however, does give a much more accurate representation of what would happen if a guy went to a girl's body. It's not like fucking grotesque. It's not like very immature, but I just think that there's a lot of little details that make it a more believable story, I guess you could say. The other thing is that we're still dealing with the classic kind of dynamic. We have a timid guy who gets transported into this girl. He's a little older now, so we're not dealing with middle schoolers, which is great. That's a nice little change, and a welcome change at that. Because this guy's essentially been following around this girl for a while, and one day she just looks back at him, laughs, and before he knows it, he's in her body. And now, I haven't read all of it, I've only read 20 chapters, but the guy in the girl body is just kind of trying to figure out, like, okay, I gotta find my actual body and swap back, but in doing so, he realizes that his original body is not the girl, because it's just someone completely different, which I think is very interesting, because body swap, we think of, I don't know, soul switching bodies, but here it's him going into her, and who knows what happened to his original body, and who knows what happened to the original girl. But this guy does come into contact with one of the girl's kind of friends. She's obsessed with the girl, but is not really friends. And she's able to figure out that something's off because of just different words she uses. And this is how obsessed that one girl is with the girl that's currently being body swapped. And so they work together to try and figure out how to get the body back, so on and so forth. And the girl helps the guy in the girl's body to try and act more like the girl until they can figure something out. And again, there we have the kind of regular dynamic. Again, we have the timid guy and the not so timid girl. But now we have a body swap kind of element in there. And I think that opens up more interactions, because now we have to try and we have the external world who is not aware that that's the dynamic at work, because everybody views that girl as who she was, which was a little more stuck up, we might say, a little more withdrawn. But that's not the case. We have a very timid guy on the inside. So actually, coming to think of it, we've really fucked around with the dynamics here, because we have, I guess you might say, a more mature girl on the outside who now has a timid guy on the inside. So how people are viewing them and how he is going to react as her is very different now. And again, we still have to work out his dynamic with that other side girl who's trying to help him become the original girl again. Anyways, I'm doing a fucking awful job explaining all of this, but I needed a Tuesday upload. And Inside Mari, I think I'm going to put low A. I think if I finish it, it might become high A. But for now, we'll put it at low A. And so this is the Shuzo Oshimi tier list. Flowers of Evil, Blood on the Tracks, both S tiers, possibly interchangeable depending on how Blood on the Tracks ends. A tier, we have Happiness and Inside Mari. Again, could swap depending on how Inside Mari ends. B tier, we have Welcome Back Alice, Avant-Garde Yumeko, Devil Ecstasy, and Yuutai Nova. C, we have Sweet Poolside and Shino Can't Say Her Name. D, we have Waltz, and F, we have Miss Kusakabe. I guess I've yet to read Drifting Net Cafe or whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a pretty last minute video. I had fun making it. I had fun talking, even if I was fucking stumbling and rambling for so long. Which Oshimi works have you read? Which are your favorites? If you want more recommendations, just ask me in the comments, and I can totally recommend. If you like Flowers of Evil, for instance, I think you might really like Welcome Back Alice. If you like Blood on the Tracks, then maybe you might like, stuff like that. I can make those connections for you. But yeah, tell me what you thought about the video. I apologize. I will say this is one of my lesser good videos. I feel like I was stumbling a lot. I feel like I wasn't saying much of substance. I don't know if it was worth your time to watch it. But who cares? If you're only hearing this now, you've already watched it, so my insecurities don't mean anything. But I need to point them out in case you try to point them out first, because then I'm immune to them then. Just kidding. Anyways, thank you for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and new video next Tuesday maybe. Peace.